So there's also systems communication, systems issues. So I talked about the SCADA system, so now I'm breaking it down a little bit different. This is a very high level kind of generic idea about how does data move around within a business, within a oil and gas operating company, right? Well, I've got data about my operating condition, right? So what are my current pressures on the pipeline? What are my current flows on the pipeline? You know, am I safe or abnormal? And if I'm abnormal, how abnormal am I? I've got product type considerations. You know, if I'm moving natural gas, that's different than moving crude oil. And if I'm moving raw gas with liquids and condensates bound up in it, and I've got pigging operations going on, that's different than I'm moving residue gas through a transmission system or through a city gate. Measurement is different because measurement is always retrospective. You know, if I'm a measurement guy, accountants walk through life looking backwards. Guys over here, they kind of walk through life looking forward. These guys walk through life looking backwards. And then, you know, what is my underlying communications capability? So there's one capability related getting the data from the remote site up through the telemetry back to the business enterprise, and then there's a whole different set of capabilities about how I move the data around the business enterprise, right? And there's some principles around that. I don't want the same data in 4 different databases if I can get away from it, right? Because that's cost, okay? So, but all of this is interconnected, right? They don't really exist on their own. So, some of the things that you want to be aware of as you're dealing with this data is things like, how easy is it to deal with all this information? You know, is the way I'm presenting the data going to cause fatigue in the operators, right? Is the way that I'm presenting the data going to cause confusion? What happens if I change something? I change the way a data point's represented.
Do you throw off the entire operation?
Yeah, because there's a presumption. Yes, there's a presumption when I start dealing with the things on the left side of this diagram. There's a presumption of accuracy and timeliness, and it's not going to change. When I start getting on the right side, or I start trying to do optimizations, things like that, it's a little different, right? There's a presumption of I'm always changing things because I'm trying to figure out how to optimize. It's making sense? Okay, so, and then there's these other considerations about how many data points am I collecting? So, I've got a compressor station, I've got 5 compressor units at that compressor station, and I'm bringing that into a pipeline control center. How many data points would typically be in the pipeline control center around that station? It'd be in the range of dozens, right? Suction and discharge across the station, measurement through the station, suction and discharge across the units, and maybe run status. But at the station, how many data points do I have? Hundreds, thousands, because now I want temperature off of, you know, each cylinder. I want fuel temperature. I want oil temperature. I want RPM. I want pressures on each head. I want to see firing information. You know, I want analytical data, right? So how often in our business do we move that that rich, if you will, analytical data through the telemetry network?
Very often.
Well, it's becoming more often, but historically it was rare. It was very rare, right? So the other question is, how often do I need the data? So in a control room, right, if I'm looking at the data from a compressor station, I might need to see it once every 5 minutes, once every minute, something like that. But if I'm running the compressor, I need to see it, I measure that in milliseconds, right? So not only do I have more data points, I have a higher data quantity because my sampling rate's higher, right? And then how often do I ask for it? Now I make this distinction because typically in remote telemetry what we talk about is I make a request for data, right? And then the data I ask for I get back. So I only get the data as frequently as I request it. But in some of the new push technologies and some of the report by exception technologies, when I ask for the data, I get all the change history when I ask for the data, right? So how often I ask for it is important, but how much I get when I ask for it's also important. And then I've got other issues about set versus processing. So it's different to ask for a set of measurement data in the full audit file than to make a request of give me all the real-time values around a compressor station, right? So what I'm driving at here is there's a lot of complexities in how we actually ask for the data, okay? So far in talking about this, all I've really done is paint a picture of what the complexities are and kind of what the context is about dealing with all this data.